There's been a recent discussion on our Figment page about creating magic systems for your fantasy story, incorporating magic. What kind of limitations, what kind of weaknesses and things like that. What do you need to do in order to make a good system? And I replied in a post using two phrases. The first phrase being Karate Kid syndrome, and the second one being Dragon Ball Z power scaling. I see two trends in inexperienced writers. I did this myself a lot in the beginning, and it's problematic. And I'll explain why it's problematic, and I'll explain what I mean. When I first began to write, I ended up giving my main character all the cool abilities, and he was quickly, I realised this much later, and he quickly became overpowered. And this is a Karate Kid character. It gives your story a short lifespan, and because after a certain point your character will either stop developing and become flat, or become ridiculously overpowered. Karate Kid syndrome is the tendency to give your character all the cool abilities and powers, as well as being nigh on undefeatable. It's impossible for the enemy to stand a chance. Just no way. Sure, there might be physical injuries or psychological injuries, but nothing the hero can't overcome relatively quickly. The spotlight is on the main character and no one else. The other characters are sort of only incorporated in the story to progress the main character. They don't serve any other purpose. That kind of focus tends to come from a sense of being too affectionate towards your main character. Perhaps because of how inexperienced writers tend to base main characters on themselves. Perhaps we do it subconsciously, but you know, people say that the first novel is often, to a large extent, autobiographical. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I imagine it would be. There's nothing wrong with doing it, I suppose, basing it on yourself, but it's difficult to see yourself in an objective manner. Like, you need to see a main character, you need to really know your main character, and you, at least I personally, I do not know myself. Not in that way. And I suspect most of us don't, or ever will. So I see a pattern. Main character gets beaten, like he does in Karate Kid. He takes a lot of beatings. He gets angry and frustrated, and he struggles. So he goes to training, finds a mentor, and he trains. He becomes more powerful. He faces his old enemy, defeats that enemy because of aforementioned training, and the problem is permanently taken care of. Now, what then? Now you've reached a point where the story cannot go any further, because a new enemy, character gets beaten again, main character goes back to training, becomes even more powerful than before, beats the new enemy, and so it continues. The stronger the main character gets, the stronger the enemies have to be for it to be interesting. The enemy needs to be able to put up a fight. And this leads us into Dragon Ball Z power scaling, which essentially is, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the anime Dragon Ball, it's an anime in which the characters become so powerful that they can blow up an entire galaxy by farting. I don't know. They just become ridiculously overpowered. And that's where it eventually will lead. So these kind of stories have a certain lifespan. And as we all know, fantasy stories tend to be very long. And a very long fantasy story with a flat character, main character, two-dimensional main character. Not really a hit. The moment your characters stop developing, people tend to lose interest. And as you see, this kind of pattern reminds me of good versus evil conflicts, which is why I have a problem with them. They can work. I'm not saying that it's impossible to make it work. But as far as main characters and plot driving conflicts goes, I prefer to stay away from Karate Kid, Son Goku, Dragon Ball, and good versus evil. So how do we fix that? How do we create something that's both innovative and fresh, but that plays within the rules? I suggest that you join us on Figment in our discussion, because personally I don't have an answer. I can only guess my way forward. I know what I shouldn't be doing, but I can't say with certainty that I know what I should be doing. So join us, help us find the answer, and hopefully we can all benefit from it.